Okay, everyone. Today we're going to learn about unreal conditionals, specifically the second conditional, which is one of the most important grammar structures at B1 level. In English, conditional sentences describe situations and their results. There are two main types, real conditionals and unreal conditionals. Real conditionals describe real or possible situations, but unreal conditionals describe imaginary, hypothetical, or unlikely situations. There are two main unreal conditionals in English, the second conditional and the third conditional. Today we are focusing on the second conditional, which we use to talk about unreal situations in the present or future. Let's start with the form. A second conditional sentence has two clauses, the condition clause and the result clause. The structure is: if plus past simple would could might plus base verb. For example, if I had money, I would travel more. The order of the clauses can change. You can also say, I would travel more if I had money. When the sentence begins with if, we usually put a comma after the first clause. We can also use unless instead of if, not. For example, unless I had free time, I wouldn't join the club. Another important point is that in formal English, we often use were instead of, was after if, especially with I, he, she, it. For example, if I were you, I'd study more. This form sounds more formal and correct in careful English. Now let's look at the use. We use the second conditional to talk about unreal or imaginary situations in the present. This means the situation is not true now. For example, if you were here, you would solve the problem, but you are not here. I could pay for the drinks if I had money, but I don't have money. If I were younger, I might stay longer, but I'm not younger. These sentences describe situations that are impossible or unlikely in the present. We also use the second conditional to talk about unlikely or imaginary situations in the future. These are things that could happen, but they probably won't. For example, if I won the lottery, I'd buy a big house. If she were rich, she could travel around the world. I might go to the match if I didn't work on Sunday. These sentences show imagination or speculation, not real plans. Let's look at different sentence types. In affirmative sentences, we say things like, if I had time, I'd visit my grandma more often. I'd study more if I were you. If I had more money, I could buy that car. In negative sentences, we can say, if I didn't work on Friday, I would go to your party. I wouldn't wear this uniform if it wasn't compulsory. They wouldn't do it if they didn't have to. We can also form questions with the second conditional. For example, would you buy this shirt if you were me? If you were a millionaire, what would you do? Where would you travel if you could go anywhere? These questions are very common in conversation because they invite imagination and discussion. Now let's connect this grammar with skills and abilities vocabulary, which is often used with conditionals. For example, if I could dive, I would explore the ocean. If she could drive, she would help us. If he trained more, he could run faster. If I had more time, I'd learn to knit. If they practiced more, they might perform better. These sentences show how we use the second conditional to talk about abilities that are not real or not true now. One very common expression in English is, if I were you. We use this structure to give advice. For example, if I were you, I'd study more. If I were you, I wouldn't quit your job. If I were you, I'd practice every day. This is a very natural and useful structure to remember. So, to summarize, we use the second conditional when we talk about imaginary present situations, unlikely future situations, hypothetical ideas, and advice. The structure is always, if plus past simple, followed by would, could, might plus base verb. If you remember this idea, not real now, only imagined, you'll know when to use the second conditional correctly.